can be the scariest thing when your clients disappear on you and you're not sure when you're going to get paid. But don't worry, because I'm going to show you a process of how to make sure you get paid on time and what to do if you don't. Before we jump into this video, do make sure you download our free course below in the description, and this will help you to get your next client in just 5 days. Make sure you stick around all the way to the end of this video because I'm going to tell you what to do if a client frequently pays you late. When you first go freelance, it can be really difficult to talk about money and it can be hard to ask for what you're owed. But if you have done the work and you've completed the project and delivered it to the client, then you certainly deserve to be paid. So we should be more confident to talk about money, and I hope that this video is going to help you to do that. The best thing that you can do with all parts of your business is to have a process in place. So I'm going to walk you through a step-by-step process of how you can make sure that you can get paid on time and what to do if you need to chase late payments. So the first step in the process is pre-planning. Now this is really important. What you should do right at the beginning of the project, even before you start the project, is to talk to your client about payment terms. Most companies do pay within 30 days, but some pay as late as 60 days. And if you leave this till you've started this project, it leaves you very little room to negotiate this later on. You should always ask your client when they process their invoices, because if you send your invoice a day later than the day they process them, it could mean that your payment gets paid later than 30 days, which is less than ideal. The second thing you need to remember in the pre-planning section of this process is that if this is a new client or someone that frequently pays you late, then you should make sure that you're in touch with the right people who pay you, that being maybe the accounts department or maybe the people that pay the suppliers. Now, the next part of the process is sending the invoice. It's really important to have an invoicing system in place, and I'm a fan of one that can send the client automatic reminders because they get reminded about your invoice, but you don't necessarily feel like you're pestering them. Just a quick note on that, you don't want to be sending the client too many reminders, so make sure you do go into the software and set the reminders to an amount that feels good for you. Let me know in the comments below this video what invoicing tools and processes you use to make sure that you get paid on time. You need to make sure you're sending your invoice as soon as the project's finished. Now, I like to always ask the producer or the client if it's okay to send the invoice over once the project is finished, and usually this is fine. I just feel like it's a nice, polite way to do it. For a client that is a frequent late payer, I would make sure you check in with them a couple of days later just to make sure that they have received your invoice. Sometimes it's worth checking 10 days before the payment is due just to make sure it's going to be paid on time or it's on the next pay run. The first thing that you should do if your invoice is overdue is you should send a nice polite email to the client asking them if the invoice is due to be paid and if there's any problems with the invoice. Usually this is enough to resolve the issue and you'll find out when your invoice is going to be paid. If there's no reply, what I would do is follow up a few days later. I would just ask similar questions about whether there's any problems with your invoice and if you're speaking with the right person. If there's still no reply a few days later, what I would do is I would call them and I would ask them if there's any problems with the invoice. Obviously still be polite, but it's a lot harder to ignore a phone call as opposed to an email. So this method usually works and you're usually going to find out what's going on with your invoice. If you're still not getting any response from any of these methods and you have some late payment fees on your invoice, then you can remind them of this on your next email. In the UK, the government has set standard late payment fees. So I would check in your country what the standard late payment fees are where you are. Usually I wouldn't re-invoice them straight away with late payment fees. If I'm not getting any response from my phone calls, from my emails after a few weeks, I may remind them that there would be some late payment fees, and usually this would be enough for them to make the payment of the original invoice. It's really, really important as you're going through this process to remember that clients do usually want to pay you, and it's usually you're not being paid because of an issue or an error somewhere. So it's great to just be polite and find out what the issue is and how it can be resolved. There are many different ways that you can escalate not being paid depending on where you're based. So I would recommend that you talk to a professional about these options. Usually simply Googling will help you to find some helpful information, or maybe a government website. Another thing to remember is how much the payment is worth to you, because you could be putting in a lot of time chasing this payment and it might not actually be worth the time that you're putting into it, what you were due to be paid in the first place. But if it's a large or a significant amount, it could be worth escalating it if it's 30 days after it's overdue. Never work for a client on a new project if their last payment for their last project is overdue. Always make sure you get that overdue payment first before you start on any other projects. And if a client frequently pays late, you might want to think about whether you want to work with that client again. This is my process to help you to get paid on time and to chase those late payments. But if you feel like you have regular gaps in your client work, you need to watch this video next, where I explain to you what's stopping you from getting regular high-paying clients. And make sure you download our free course below this video. This will help you to get your next client in just 5 days.